memories of playing there? Do you reckon it's changed a little bit since the early 2000s?
Yes. Yeah, I've been back, but I saw the IPL final and the games there and saw the stadium, so it's obviously altered a lot. I think the whole city's changed a lot. I think there's been a huge amount of development there, so I think the guys are actually excited to get there. My memories are of it being an incredibly flat surface. I'm not sure we'll get that, but those were the old wickets, lots of runs and hanging on for dear life on day 5.
How do you approach a test where you might have 85, 100, 90,000 people there, or maybe 0? I don't really know, depending on what the ticket situation is like. None of us seem to know. How do you presuming there is a big crowd?
Yeah, I think we're expecting a big one at least the first day. The talk has been excitement around actually playing a test match and in front of that, and then also just I suppose almost the logistics of it on the field and how you deal with reviews, referrals, all that sort of stuff, because the noise will play a huge part in that. So I think guys have been trying to be as pragmatic as possible around how it's actually going to play out, as well as being pretty excited about the size of the crowd.
Does that crowd size have an impact on players and their behaviours on the field?
I don't think so. I can only think of my own experiences, and I think you get so immersed in the actual game that becomes the focal point, and the crowd's just the occasional distraction, occasional talking point, looking up, seeing what they're doing. But I think the noise is the main thing that you're going to have to deal with. If is that many people, the guys who played in that IPL final or the preliminary finals, I know Josh Hazel was in that, they said that it was pretty noisy, so I think that's the thing that we're going to have to deal with.
You said you've obviously been coming to India for a long time. How has it changed from those roads? How would you describe that change from what those tracks that you guys played on to what we see now in terms of?
There's been a question a lot of the guys have asked if I'd played on these sorts of wickets, and I just haven't. They were always just the war of attrition, the wickets that I played on. It was India won the toss and got 600. You get 400 and then hang on for dear life in the last couple of days. That's normally how it played out. It was a real grind. It was day 5. The result was still in the balance. Then normally a draw or a win to India. That was ultimately how it played out a lot of the time, because they were such a good team. But now it's obviously the game's in fast forward in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Do you marvel at what Nathan Lyon's been able to achieve this series?
I think ever since I started watching bowl, I think I've marvelled at it. I think as a fellow finger spinner who can't do what he did, there's always that element of his ability to bowl that ball that's just so impressive. And I think, I suppose the thing that all of us sit back and say is that it's the consistency of his skill, and I think not always appreciated how hard it is to do what he does, but then to repeat it 98% of the time. He hardly ever bowls a bad ball, and he just puts so much pressure on batsmen because of that skill level. And you think, well, they know what's coming, why can't they deal with it? It's because he gets so much on the ball that it is actually hard to counter, and we saw him at his absolute best in this test match.
Can you just talk a little bit about Matt Coonham as well, from a fellow left-armer's perspective? I mean, not a vast amount of first-class experience, neither has Todd, and he's done well, but just on Matt and what you've seen as a fellow left-armer in him. I think all the spinners have brought a consistency about them, and I think that's the main challenge on these surfaces, is that the expectation's so high that you're going to do well, but almost you're going to take a wicket every ball. And you saw from Matt's first over how much it was turning, and then for him just to hang in there and remain consistent on the areas they need to bowl. I think all the spinners, like both teams, there's just hardly any bad balls bowled at all, and when there is, it's such a release on the whole game. So I think Cooney in particular to come in so early in his career, and Todd as well, and to be able to consistent against some of the best players of spin you'll come across in these conditions and with these expectations has been probably the most impressive thing so far. How did you, I know you said the pitches here were flatter when you played, but how did you deal with that expectation to win games as a spinner later in the game, or if you did get a ragging turner once in a while? How did you deal with that?
I was so tired from bowling 70 overs that the win wasn't on the cards. Look, I think it's something that I always struggle with. I think that the nature of you do a role, I suppose first innings, particularly New Zealand and places like that, where you just expect to bowl overs and be economical, and then all of a sudden you're shoved into the last innings, go ahead and win it, and it's most of the time not as straightforward as that. So I think the guys who do it consistently, there's a number on show in this for both teams in this series are impressive. And I think they don't wilt to the pressure, they just understand their process and they repeat and repeat and repeat. And I think that's the real skill over here, is just to repeat that as much as you can, because you can get carried away with what's going on, the expectation. But I mean, all 6 spinners so far in the series have been able to manage those expectations.
As far as Todd's concerned, that spell he bowled to Virat the first day here, where he was kind of able to work him across. He threatened the outside edge, got the stumping in Delhi, and then I suppose hit the bullseye with the LBW. Is that the indicator of his, I guess, skill and maturity at a young age?
Yeah, I think Steve Smith singled him out around his performance in this last test. Obviously, Nathan and Matt got all the wickets, but he mentioned that his spell allowed everyone to, I suppose, work around him and take those wickets. And I think that probably embodies it, that series of balls that he's bowled to Kohli, and the fact that I don't think Kohli's ever been stumped before. So in the test match in Delhi, so I think Todd has that skill that he can be a defensive bowler, he can be an attacking bowler, he can pretty much work around whatever is required from him in the game. And for such a young spinner, inexperienced spinner as well, I mean, he hasn't played that much first class cricket, to be able to come into here and in these tough situations and perform the role of what's required has been impressive.
And just as far as the start of the series, obviously Cooney came in as a result of Mitch Swepson going home temporarily and then plays, but sort of working through things with Ash, that clearly was a difficult phase of the trip.
Yeah, well, first of all, I've never had 5 spinners on a tour before, so it's been a bit of fun for that. And obviously Ash had played that last test in Sydney and the expectations were here, but I just think that the nature of the surface over here, that speaking to Andrew, that control that Murph was able to offer was appealing, and I think it just lent itself to those 2 off spinners being in, I suppose, just ahead of Ash for that first test, and then they performed so well that it was hard to turn your back on them after that.
And does it show the challenge between the flipping white ball, red ball, and I suppose red ball needing that consistency over such long periods when it might be in the big bash it's 4 quality overs?
Well, I think it's more cricket than anything. I think the guys who are perennial tourists, want of a word, or second spinners or 4th seamers in a group, that they're valuable to the group, but they don't actually get that game time. And that's probably, look at someone like a Scott Boland, who's been able to come in and out of the team at times and perform, and you're only impressed by that. But it is a tricky thing, and I think guys sometimes get a little bit left behind because they're important to the squad, but they can't get a game, but you don't want to send them home. It's a really hard juggling act.
I'm just paranoid on my phone. I didn't turn my phone down. Sorry, that would ruin you.
Did you hit record this time?
I just paused. Just on Todd Murphy and Dan, like, how do you gauge the development of a young spinner when they're bowling on pitches like these? Like, so what can your takeaways be, and what can these performances tell you about them when they are playing on pitches which won't have so much on offer?
It's a really good question. I think and take the individual cases, I think Murph, who's been able to perform multiple roles in a short period of time, I think that's where you take confidence that he can bowl the side spin, he can bowl the overspin like Nathan, he can chop and change between those roles. So I think you get the confidence that he can transition into all style of pitches all around the world. And I think for Cooney, it's his ability to turn the ball. I think he gets an increased amount of revs on it, and so that's going to be his differentiator. And if he remains as consistent as he has been in there, that he can put a lot of pressure on, he gets a lot of drift and he spins the ball hard. So I think that's the other factor that allows you to think that these guys can compete in all kinds of surfaces.
Just on the pitches, man, like you said, you played on very different kinds of pitches in India. Now since 2019, they seem to have gone this way. Just as a former spinner and someone who's coached a lot of spin, what is your read on these pitches? Like, are they as bad for Test cricket as some people are making them out to be?
I don't think so. I think the thing that I suppose embellishes it all is Ashwin Jadeja in particular, that they're so good that they revel in these conditions and they make it look as hard as it possibly can in Test cricket. And then the challenge has always been for the overseas spinners to come in and match them, and I think that's what we've been able to do in this series, that our spinners have been on even footing, and you probably couldn't say that in some previous series, other teams, not necessarily the Australian team. So I think that's been what's made it an even contest. I like the surf. Well, I don't mind the surfaces because I feel like it's the same for everyone. It doesn't feel like the toss is the key ingredient, as been seen by 3 teams winning against it, and you almost know what you expect. You turn up and you can see that it's going to be this type of wicket and you can prepare for it, and I think that allows some skill to still come into it, some perseverance, some fortitude around the things that you have to do. And I think the batting group, hearing them talk, has started to buy into that as well. Like a 30 could be a great day, and it's how you get that 30 that makes such a difference. So the challenge is in accepting it more than anything, and that's easier said than done.
One thing that Nathan mentioned before the start of the indoor test match was that he thought he bowled well in Nagpur, but maybe when he went to Delhi, he just sort of because of the nature of the wickets, he just concentrated on bowling his stop ball more and not worrying as much about seeing positions. Like, is that something that is almost a readjustment when you get a pitch that's going to do something for you no matter what you see in position?
Yeah, I think that's a fair reflection. I think the first test we talked a lot about the side spin and to incorporate that in, because I think on the red soil it tends to benefit you a little bit more, and that's what Todd went to a bit and Nath did as well. And then just the realisation, we saw Ashwin bowling a little bit more over the top, and so trying to replicate what he'd done, and that suits Nath down to the ground. So he was more than happy to buy into that style of bowling, and he got early results, and he was able just to settle in that style of bowling, and it suited him well. And I think in this test match he was able to go back and forward a little bit more. So the real skill that he's obviously bringing to the table is the assessment of the wicket and the style that he needs to bowl.
Have you got a fresh outlook on how the tail can eke out a few more runs, Dan, as not a tail ender yourself, but someone who started the rolling order and worked his way up? Is there anything you guys can do differently to get a few more runs out of those guys?
I think there's a busyness that needs to happen. I think we all understand that defence is not necessarily the way through that situation because of how much the ball's turning and how good the bowlers are, and finding your scoring areas. And I think Pat did that exceptionally well in the first innings in Delhi, and I think the lower 4 have got an understanding how to do it and how they want to do it. It's just having the courage to actually take it out there. And even you see innings like Umesh Yadav, I know it's on the back of probably having that licence, but that can be such a difference maker in the scheme of things. So we've got to push our lower 4 to have the confidence to actually take the game on.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, appreciate it.
No worries.